Welcome back to your daily dose of ancient wisdom. We continue our reading of Srimad Bhagavata, Book 1, Discourse 9. Yudhisthira and others call on Bhisma, and the latter drops his mortal coils, extolling Sri Krishna. Sutta went on. Thus, after the wrongdoings perpetrated against humanity, King Yudhisthira proceeded to Vinasana, the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where Devarata or Bhishma lay on his bed of arrows, seeking enlightenment about all sacred duties. Thereupon, all his celebrated brothers, Bhima and others, followed him. O holy Brahmanas, in chariots decked with gold and driven by excellent horses, as also the sages Vyasa, Dhaumya, the family priest of Yudhisthira, and others. Lord Sri Krishna himself, O Saunaka, rode in a chariot along with Dhananjaya, Arjuna so called because of his having fetched as a tribute from his enemies untold riches for Yudhisthira, thereby enabling him to perform his famous Rajasuya sacrifice, which earned him the title of emperor. Accompanied by them, King Yudhisthira shone brightly like Kubera, the chief of Yakshas, a class of demigods, in the midst of Guhyakas or Yakshas. Perceiving Bhishma lying on the ground like God fallen from heaven, the Pandavas and their attendants, as well as Sri Krishna, made obeisance to him. At that time, O Saunaka, Brahmanas, the celestial sages and the royal sages all had assembled there in order to see Bhishma, the foremost of the Bharatas. Parvata, Narada, Dhaumya, the divine Badarayana Vedavyasa, Bharadwaja, Parasurama and his pupils, Vasishtha, Indrapramada, Trita, Gritsmada, Asita, Kakasvina, Gautama, Atri, Vishwamitra, Sudarshana, and other holy sages like Brahmarata, and even so Kashyapa, Angirasa, and others arrived with their pupil. O Saunaka, seeing these highly blessed souls assembled there, Bhishma, the foremost of Vasus, a class of gods, who was well versed in the principles of right conduct, paid his respects to them with due regard to the occasion and the place. Bhishma was also acquainted with the glory of Sri Krishna, the Lord of the universe, who had sat before him in a personal form assumed to Maya, and was also enthroned in his heart as he paid his homage to him. Eyes blinded with tears of affection, Bhishma looked at the sons of Pandu, who sat beside him, full of modesty and love, and spoke to them as follows. How painful and how unjust it has been that you, the potency of the righteousness and votaries of the Brahmanas, Dharma, goodness, and Lord Achyuta Sri Krishna, should have lived a life of suffering which you surely did not deserve. When the great warrior Pandu breathed his last, you were all tender of age, and my daughter-in-law Pritha, along with you, her children, had to suffer many hardships on your account more than once. I believe that all your unwelcome experiences were attributable to time, the providence, for the whole world with its guardian deities is ruled over by time, even as the clouds are by the wind. Where King Yudhisthira, the son of Dharma, was the ruler, Bhima held mace in his hand, Arjuna was the archer, and Gandiva the bow, where Sri Krishna was the friend and well-wisher to think of adversity even there. Indeed, no man, O king, can ever discover the intention of Sri Krishna. Even seers get bewildered, they are seeking to find it out. Therefore, knowing it for certain that all these events depend on the will of the Providence, O Chief of the Bharatas, follow his will. O ruler of men, and protect the helpless people as you are their sole monarch. Sri Krishna, in God himself, he is no other than the prime person, Lord Narayana. Deluding the world by his Maya, he lives incognito among the rishis, a branch of Yadus. No one else than Lord Siva, the celestial sage Narada, and Lord Kapila himself, O Yudhisthira, know the most hidden glory of Sri Krishna, whom you think to be your cousin or the maternal uncle's son, beloved friend and the greatest well-wisher, and whom out of affection you made your counselor, envoy, and charioteer. In him who is the soul of the universe, who looks upon all with the same eye, is one without a second, is free from egotism and blemishes. There can be no sense of diversity in regards to these divergent functions on any account. Yet, O King, look at his compassion for those who are exclusively devoted to him. In that Sri Krishna has appeared in person before me at this hour when I am about to give up the ghost. A yogic or mystic who casts off his body with this thought fixed on him through devotion and chanting his name with his tongue is rid of all hankerings and released from the bondages of action. May that Lord, who is adorable even for gods and possessed of four arms, whose lotus-like countenance beams with gracious smiles and reddish eyes, and who appears to others only in their meditation, stay on here till I shuttle off this body. Sutta continued. Hearing this, Yudhisthira asked Bhisma, even as he lay on his cage-like bed of arrows, questions concerning a variety of dharmas, sacred obligations, of course, of conduct, in the presence of the rishis. Thereupon, Bhishma, who had realized the truth, discoursed upon, one by one, the various dharmas or duties determined by the innate disposition of men and apportioned with due regard to their varna or the social grade, and ashrama, the stage of life, and the twofold dharmas involving worldly activities or pravitri, and those marked by withdrawal from such activity, nivriti, severally recommended for those endowed with dispassion and those who are full of worldly attachment, the dharmas relating to charitable gifts, the duties obligatory on monarchs, the courses of conduct which are conducive to liberation, the duties of women, and the courses of conduct that are intended to propitiate the Lord, both briefly and in detail. He also explained, O Saunaka, the four ends of the human pursuit, namely dharma, the religious merit, artha, the worldly riches, kama, the sensuous enjoyment, moksha, the final beatitude or liberation, as well as the means to them in their true perspective with the help of many illustrative anecdotes and stories. While he was thus discoursing on dharma, there arrived the time when the sun changes its course towards the north, a time which is coveted by yogis or mystics who drop their body according to their pleasure. Thereupon, Bhishma, who had led on the battlefield thousands of warriors, wound up his speech and exclusively fixated his mind, which it was absolutely free from worldly attachments, as well as his eyes, which knew no winking, on Sri Krishna, the prime person, who was present before him in his four-armed form, clad in shining yellow robes. That last traces of sin, if any, left in him were obliterated by his concentrated thought on the most holy, and the pain which he felt on account of weapons or arrows piercing his body, quickly disappeared at the mere glance of the Lord. Now, while casting off his body, he stopped all the activities and wanderings of his senses and extolled Lord Janardhana, Sri Krishna. Bhishma said, "Now on the eve of my departure from this mortal world, I offer my mind, which is free from all thirst of worldly enjoyment, to the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, the foremost of Yadus, who, while retaining his own blissful character all along, sometimes assume his own prakritic maya in order to carry on his sport, from which flows the stream of creation. May I cherish motiveless love of Sri Krishna, the friend of Vijaya Arjuna, who has assumed a personality charming of the three worlds and dark as the Tamala tree, and is clad in excellent robes, brilliant as rays of sun, and whose lotus-like countenance has curly locks floating about it. May my mind, body, and soul rest in Sri Krishna, whose face is hemmed all round by flowing hair, soiled with the dust raised by the horse's hoof on the battlefield, and is bedecked with drops of perspiration, and whose skin is being pierced by my sharp arrows, though protected with a shining armor. May I develop love for the friend of Pritha's son Arjuna, who at the request of his friend immediately drove and placed his chariot in the middle of the Pandava and Kaurava hosts, and planting himself there, cut short the life of hostile warriors by his very looks. May I be blessed with the devotion of the feet of that Supreme Being who, by imparting spiritual knowledge in the form of Gita, dispelled the temporary delusions of his friend, who, on seeing us, the generals of Kaurava forces, at the van of the hostile army, arrayed at a distance, felt disinclined to kill his own kith and kin because he regarded it as sin. Breaking his own vow not to take up arms during Mahabharata war, to fulfill and exalt my vows of compelling him to take up the arms, Sri Krishna jumped down from the car on which he had taken his seat, and like a lion that pounces upon an elephant to kill him, darted towards me with the wheel of his chariot in his hand, the earth trembling under his feet and his upper garments dropping behind him. Hit with the piercing arrows of a desperado like me, and bathed in blood, and with his armor broken, he who rushed forth to kill me, disregarding the remonstrance of Arjuna, may that Lord Mukunda, the bestower of blessedness, be my asylum. May I, in my last moments, develop love for Lord who has taken up upon himself the responsibility to protect the chariot of Vijaya Arjuna, took the charioteer's whip in one hand and held the horse's reins in the other, and looked most attractive in that charming role, witnessing which at last moment they who fall on this battlefield attained a form similar to his, or Sarayupa Mukti, as the scriptures call it. Having had the signal honor of enjoying the sight of his charming gait, graceful movement, winsome smiles, and amorous glances during the famous Rasa dance in Vrindavana, the cowherds, in their mad ecstasy, imitated his place when the Lord suddenly disappeared from their midst. Wide Discourses 32 and 33 of the book 10, and attained identity with him for the time being. In an assembly crowded with hosts of sages and foremost princes during the Rajasuya sacrifice performed by Yudhisthira, Sri Krishna, who attracted the eyes of them all, had the honor of being worshipped first of all before my very eyes. It is he, the soul of the universe, who has appeared before me at this moment. Having shaken off the foolish idea of diversity, I have realized that unborn Lord, who, though one, is severally enthralled in the heart of the embodied creatures brought forth by himself, even as the sun, though one, appears as many to every eye. Sutta went on. Having thus merged his soul with all the activities of his mind, speech, and the visual sense in Sri Krishna, the universal soul, Bhishma expired, his breath being dissolved into the atmospheric air. Perceiving that Bhishma had entered into one of the invisible Brahma, all those present there became silent, even as birds do so at the close of the day. Then sounded kettle drums beaten by gods and human beings. The pious among the princes shouted applause, and showers of flowers poured from heaven. Having had the funeral and other rites performed in respect to the deceased, O Saunaka, the descendant of Bhrigu, Yudhisthira was plunged in sorrow for some time. The sages who had assembled there extolled Sri Krishna with great delight, uttering his secret names. And then Sri Krishna, in their heart, they returned to each of his own hermitage. Thereafter, Yudhisthira, accompanied by Sri Krishna, returned to Hastinapura and comforted his uncle Dhritarashtra as well as his aunt Gandhari, who was known for her austerity. Then, permitted by his uncle and with the approval of Sri Krishna, the son of Vasudeva, the king ruled over his ancestral kingdom with righteousness. Thus ends the 9th discourse entitled Recovery of the Throne by Yudhisthira in Book 1 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as Paramahamsa Samhita. Thank you.